Hey students, this is Mrs. Tran-Bloom recording on 5.6 notes, graphing all functions. Okay, so many of these are review from first semesters as well. So let's start with the linear equation, y equals x. Because y is the same as x, whatever x is, y should always be exactly the same. So whatever the input is, the output is identical. So as you know already, if it's a linear function, that means it's a line. So -2, -2, -1. Okay, so all the dots, whatever x is, I'm making a lot more dots as you can see here than the chart. Okay, so the more dots you make, the straighter your line's gonna be. So as you can see, I have a straight line. So I'm gonna go and draw my line. Okay, so that's a linear function. Now next, you guys had also studied the absolute value function. So absolute value function means whatever input you chuck in, the output is always positive. And remember, it was a V shape. So -2 is +2, -1 +1, 0, 0, and so on and so on. And remember, you can make more dots than what's on the grid as long as it's the correct input and output. And this is a V, so make sure you make your vertex really, really sharp, okay? Now, if you missed your dots, just make them a lot fatter on your homework so we can see them, just like that. Another function we study already is the quadratic function, y equals x squared. Now again, because every single input is being square, then now we're going to get positive outputs, okay? So -2 is +4, -1 is 1. Now the difference between this and your absolute value is that this is a U shape. So the bottom is super roundabout, okay? Not a V like the absolute value. Then you guys also study the cubic. Now the cubic is, okay, well, I can have negative because it's an odd power. So -2 to the third is now -8, -1, 0, 1, and 8. And yes, you should be able to get the inputs and outputs super quick, just like that. So -2 is now -8, -1 is -1, 0, 0, 1 is 1, and 2 is 8. So we just like that. Okay. Next is going to be the square root. Square root, remember, under the square root, you cannot have negative numbers. So make sure we start with the smallest number, which is 0. Square root of 0 is 0. Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 9 is 3. And then we get 4 is next. Remember, this is the one that looks like the eyebrow curve. So we are going to plot these points out. 4 is now 2. 9 is going to go to 3. Even though this is a 10 by 10, guys, don't be shy. You can extend it 6 units to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now that last dot, oops, sorry. The 16,4, it's definitely outside of the grid. All right. So that looks like the eyebrow curve right there. Now cube root meaning that I can have negative input, and cube root of -8 is now -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So -8 is now -2, -1 is -1. So this is sideways, okay? It looks like if you look at the cube root and the cubic, they are somewhat, there's some similarities there, right? Okay, there you go. Can you see that this is hugging the x-axis here? And then the cubic function is hugging the y-axis. And then look at that. The inputs and outputs are kind of swapped, right? Okay. Now, you guys just recently studied exponential. Now, this is just one of the parent functions, right? Remember, in exponential and log, we have infinitely many parent functions depending on what the base is. So this is one of the many parent function of exponential. So when we plug in -2 is -2 to the second, just like I'm sorry, I wrote it wrong. Ooh, don't do that. I'm sorry, the base is 2. 2 to the negative 2 power. To make the power positive, we write it in the denominator, and then this is really 1 over 4. Okay, and then 2 to the negative 1, again, that's the same thing as making. If we were to make this a positive exponent, we are going to write it in the bottom, so that's going to be 1/2. 2 to the 0, any number to the 0 is always 1. 2 to the 1 is 2. 2 squared is now 4. So now we have negative 2 up a quarter, and then negative 1 up a half. I know those two dots look somewhat about the same height, but my pen is super fat, so that's why. 0 is up 1, 1 is 2, and 2 is up 4. Now, if you guys remember, we have a horizontal asymptote, so it should go along your x-axis. And let's curve this out. Don't touch your asymptote. We're going to make these dots fatter so your teacher can see, right? Those are the 5 dots with the horizontal asymptote graph. Now, your logarithmic function, again, this is just one of the many parent functions, right? Technically, I can have any base function I want. So we're starting out with base 2. So we're going to go, remember we talked about the equivalent function of this in exponential is 2 to the y equals x. So what value of, and then we talked about, hey, you know what? If it's 2 to the y equals x, we can pick some y's instead of, right, picking some x. So if we pick y, we go, okay, 2 to the negative 2 is, to make it positive, we go 1 over 2 squared, so that's a quarter. Okay, so that's a quarter. So this is now a quarter. And then we go 2 to the negative 1, to make it positive, we move 1 over 2 to the 1, so that's going to be a half here. And 2 to the 0 is 1, 2 to the 1 is 2, and then 2 squared is 4. So as you can see, let me get a different color pen. Okay, these all correlate. So now the negative 2 goes here, the negative 1 goes next, 0, 1, and 2. Okay, let's plot those. A positive quarter, I'm going to go down to negative 2. A positive half is now negative 1. 1 is 0. 2 is up 1. And 4 up 2. Again, remember for logarithmic functions, we always have a vertical asymptote here at x equals to 0. So make sure you guys draw the asymptotes out along with the curve. You missed your dots, go back and make it super fat like here. My pen is really fat, so that's why I tend to make the dots closer. Now we have one more function here called the reciprocal function. So when x is negative 2 is negative 1 over 2. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so I can write it. When x is negative 1 is negative 1. When x is negative half is now negative 2. X can't be 0, so that will give us an asymptote there. Ooh, what happened? And when x is 1/2, it's now positive 2. When x is 1, it's back to 1. When x is 2, it's going to be half. Remember, the asymptote is when x is 0, right? So that's one of them. When x is 0, we're going to make one vertical asymptote here that will give us that first asymptote. Then you guys remember we also have another asymptote called the horizontal asymptote because y can't be 0 either. So make sure you guys have those two asymptotes clearly drawn out. Then plot 3 dots to the right and 3 dots to the left. Here we go. Negative 2 is now negative half. Negative 1 is negative 1. And then negative half is negative 2. So try not to touch your asymptotes. Whoa. Like that. Nice and smooth. Okay, students? Make your dots fatter. There you go. Then on the right side, positive half, go up 2. 1 is 1. 2 is now a half. So, come on, pen. There you go. So now let's make this nice and smooth. Okay, so we have 2 sides. Okay, if you ever miss your dot, just make it bigger. All right, so those are all of the functions we have studied so far.